Now it's time for On Point, where we speak to experts to delve deeper into the biggest news stories in the spotlight right now. Much of the world's focus is on the conflict in Ukraine, but despite the general lack of back-to-back news coverage that we used to see, COVID-19 remains a serious issue in many different countries, not least South Korea, which, as we've been reporting on, is seeing a massive surge in Omicron cases right now. However, countries that have already experienced what South Korea is enduring now are facing yet another wave.
This has many experts pondering whether is this the start of a new wave. They say waning immunity, shifting behavior, and new variants may all be playing a part in the uptick some European and Asian countries. For more on this, we connect to Professor Michael Toole, Associate Principal Research Fellow at the Burnet Institute in Melbourne, Australia. Good morning, Professor.
Good morning.
So many people assumed the rampant spread of Omicron would provide natural immunity against COVID-19, but we are seeing another wave even in heavily vaccinated countries. Why is this so?
Yes, the Omicron surge began in December, and it largely affected Europe and North America. Then, of course, it moved east, and we've seen this year huge numbers of cases in both high and high-income countries like South Korea, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, Singapore, and low-income countries like Vietnam, Indonesia, and Thailand. Now, as you said, we're starting to see an uptick in new cases back in Europe. Hasn't begun yet in the US. But in Europe, it's likely due to a number of factors, three main factors. One is this new, what we call a subvariant, or a kind of sister of the first Omicron variant. It's called BA2. It is 50% more infectious than BA1. Secondly is a change in behaviours. In countries like Denmark, all restrictions were dropped, including all mask wearing indoors. Thirdly is the waning of immunity from vaccines, where many people, even in highly vaccinated countries, had their third dose or their booster 3 or 4 or 5 months ago, and they are now less immune to the virus. So 3 or 4 factors there.
Right, I wanted to talk a little bit more about the waning effectiveness of the vaccines, because there have been a number of studies coming out that showing that while the 4th booster shot does kind of boost you back up to where you were straight after the 3rd booster shot, or when the 3rd booster shot was at its most effective, a lot of younger people are thinking, you know, I'm healthy. Statistics show that young, healthy people generally don't get that sick, and certainly a lot fewer of them actually succumb to COVID-19. Is it worth, in your opinion, a more targeted approach, perhaps saying, OK, the younger population don't need to get the 4th booster shot, or do you think everyone should be required to get a 4th booster shot?
Well, first I'll start with the 3rd booster shot. That has shown to be very effective, including against Omicron, at least the first version of Omicron. So 2 studies from the US and UK show that a 3rd dose protects against hospitalisation by about 90%. It's very high. However, 10 weeks later, after that 3rd shot, it goes down to 80%. Still high, but it's showing a direction downwards. The only study we have of the effectiveness of a 4th dose is from Israel. And they found the number of antibodies in your blood did increase, but the protection against hospitalisation and death did not change. So at the moment, I think it's not worth giving a 4th dose to healthy young adults, but it is very important in people who are immunocompromised, so people who are being treated for cancer, leukemia, rheumatoid arthritis, and the very elderly. So for younger people, no, I don't think it's necessary, but it is essential that they get a 3rd dose.
Professor Toole, a lot of countries have been moving back to normal. Do you think this change in behavior has also, contributed to the resurgence in some countries? And if so, do you think citizens would accept harsher restrictions?
Yes, as I said before, I think Denmark is a model of what not to do, and that is to ease all restrictions overnight. So we should take a gradual approach. As for reimposing, I call them precautions rather than restrictions. We should start with those we know are effective, but not so intrusive on our lives. Now, Scotland has just reintroduced indoor masks, and that's where countries should start. Social distancing, so density limits in indoor spaces, and something that's been neglected, improving ventilation in indoor spaces. For example, making it mandatory, for example, in a bar or a restaurant, to have a carbon dioxide monitor, to look at the quality of air in that space. So they're the three things that I think we can do that don't actually impose on people's lives, and they don't affect the economy. I think it probably won't happen that we'll go back to the complete lockdowns.
And finally, Professor Toole, just quickly, Moderna's CEO recently said that they need to come out with some new vaccine formula for the fall, if possible, that covers all variants of COVID-19. Firstly, do you think that's possible in such a short time frame? And if you think a new variant does emerge, how do you imagine it might look like?
Well, both Moderna and Pfizer are working on a vaccine that responds to Omicron, at least the first version of Omicron. It'll probably take a while, but the mRNA vaccines are relatively easy to modify. As for a vaccine that will protect against all variants, we don't know what the next variant will be. Virologists have been surprised at how much this virus has mutated. Back in the days of Delta, most experts thought the next variant will be related to Delta, but it wasn't. Omicron was a brand new variant. So we don't know what the next variant will be. But there is a lot more investment going on around the world in what we call a vaccine, a pan-coronavirus vaccine that would lead to immunity against particles in the virus that don't mutate. So not on the surface spike protein, but inside. That may take years.
All right. Professor, thank you so much for your insights. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you.